Welcome to English Stories Academy.
This is not a lesson. It's not a grammar class. This is the real story of a boy who started with nothing. No fluent English, no confidence, no voice. But today, he works in a global company, speaks fearlessly, and inspires millions to never give up on themselves. If you've ever felt shy, nervous, or scared to speak English, if you've ever stayed silent even when you had something to say, if you've ever thought you're not good enough, this story is for you. And I promise, it will change something inside you. So stay with us till the end, because as you listen, you won't just learn how Liam mastered English. You'll learn how you can do it too. And if you're serious about your journey, subscribe to our channel right now, because every video we make is not just about English. It's about your future. Now let's begin with the story of a boy named Liam. My name is Liam, and for a long time, I was silent. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I didn't believe I had the right to say it in English. I grew up in a small town where nobody spoke English. We had one internet cafe, no English classes, and people laughed at you if you tried to speak like someone from outside. My father worked in a small garage. My mother sold bread from home. They worked harder than anyone I know, but they never had the chance to dream big. But I did. I had a dream. I wanted to become a designer, a real one, someone who could work with international companies, show ideas to the world, and present confidently in English. But every time I tried to speak, my throat closed, my heart raced, my mind said, "You're not ready. You're not enough. Stay quiet." This is the story of how I broke that silence. This is the story of how I trained my mouth, changed my mind, and rebuilt my voice. Word by word, day by day. Not perfectly, but powerfully. If you've ever been afraid to speak in English, I know your pain, but I also know your power. So let me take you back to the beginning. Part 1. I stayed silent because I was scared. It started in school. I was 15. One day, the English teacher pointed at me and asked me to read a sentence from the book. I knew the words. I could read them in my head. But my mouth refused to open. I looked at the page, then at her, then at the class, and then I said nothing. People laughed. Someone said, "He doesn't know English." But the truth is, I did. I just didn't know how to speak it out loud. That day, I made a decision. Not on purpose, but deep inside. I decided, it's safer to be silent. From that moment, every English class felt like torture. I avoided eye contact. I prayed the teacher wouldn't ask me. And when someone asked me a question in English, I just nodded or smiled. But the silence didn't end at school. It followed me everywhere. In shops, I avoided speaking to tourists. Online, I never joined English chats. At home, I stayed quiet, even though my dreams were screaming inside me. One night, I watched a YouTube video of a guy presenting a design to a client. He spoke fluent English. He explained everything with confidence. He smiled. He belonged. I paused the video and just sat there. Because I knew I could make designs like that, but I couldn't speak like that. And that broke me. At 17, I applied for a remote internship. They liked my design portfolio. They invited me to a Zoom interview. In English. I said yes. But inside, I was shaking. When the call began, the interviewer said, "Hi, Liam, how are you today?" Simple line, but I froze. I tried to speak, but the words didn't come. I smiled awkwardly, then said in broken English, I fine, thank you." My voice cracked. My chest was tight. He was kind. He continued the interview. But I already knew the job was gone. Not because I wasn't talented, but because my silence spoke louder than I did. People think not speaking English means you're not smart. But that's not true. I had ideas. I had dreams. I just didn't have a voice. And it wasn't because I didn't learn. It was because I didn't practice speaking. I had studied vocabulary. I had watched videos. But I never trained my mouth. I never practiced out loud. I never felt safe to speak. So I stayed silent. Not because I wanted to, but because fear had become my language. After that Zoom interview, I didn't leave my room for hours. I turned off my phone. I closed my laptop. I didn't even cry. I just stared at the wall. Empty. I kept hearing that moment over and over in my head. "Hi, Liam. How are you today?" And then, the silence. That one question destroyed months of work, hours of effort, and all the hope I had. And the worst part? I understood everything he said. I understood every sentence, every word. But I still couldn't reply. I had the English inside me, but I had locked it away, deep inside. And I didn't know how to open that lock. The lock wasn't language. It was fear. People say, learn vocabulary. People say, watch English movies. People say, use this app, that website, this course. I did all of that. I had lists of vocabulary. I watched hours of videos. I followed Instagram pages. I knew the words. I just couldn't use them when it mattered. Why? Because I never trained my mouth. Because I never trained my courage. I was the guy who got the answers right on paper, but failed in conversation. I could write an email, but I couldn't say hello without sweating. I could understand a podcast, but I couldn't speak even one clear sentence out loud. I had built an English brain, but I had never built an English mouth. And so I kept locking it all away. Every time I wanted to speak, I stopped myself. I'd say, not now. I'd say, tomorrow. I'd say, I'll practice later. But later never came, because fear grows in silence. And every time I stayed silent, the lock became stronger. What if I make a mistake? What if they laugh? What if I sound stupid? What if I forget the word? What if I freeze again? I said, what if, so many times, that I forgot to say anything real. I was living inside my brain, not my mouth. I was playing fake conversations in my head, but saying nothing in the real world. It was around midnight. Everyone at home was asleep. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. I felt heavy, tired, frustrated, angry, but mostly ashamed. Ashamed that I had all these dreams, and I was doing nothing about them. Ashamed that I was letting fear decide my life. And then something happened. I got up, slowly. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. It was dark, but I could see my reflection. I looked at myself, really looked. My eyes were tired, my shoulders were down. I looked like someone who had given up. And then, without planning, I said one sentence out loud. I want to speak English. That was it. No fancy words, no long lines, just that one sentence. And when I heard my own voice, I felt something break, something shift, because for the first time, I had spoken not to impress someone, not to answer a question, not to pass a test. I had spoken for me. I know it doesn't sound dramatic. I didn't give a speech. I didn't sing a song. I just said one sentence in the mirror. But that sentence was a key. It didn't open the door fully. But it made me believe. Maybe the lock isn't as strong as I thought. I used to think fear meant I wasn't ready. But now I know. Fear is just a sign that something matters. And English mattered to me. Not for grades, not for likes, but for freedom. So I made a promise that night. Every night, I will say at least one sentence in English, even if I whisper, even if I stutter, even if I forget the words. One sentence, one voice, one chance to get stronger. No one saw me. No one clapped. No one congratulated me. But I knew something had begun. The silence was still there. But now, so was the sound of my voice. Part 2. The sentence that set me free. After I said that first sentence in the mirror, I want to speak English. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was scared, but because for the first time in years, I felt a spark. It was small, quiet, but it was there. Hope. And I kept hearing my own voice in my head. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fluent. But it was mine. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was still quiet. And instead of grabbing my phone, I walked back to the mirror. I looked at myself. Same face, same eyes. But something felt different. I stood there. And this time, I didn't wait for motivation. I just opened my mouth and said, "My name is Liam. I am learning English one day. I will speak fluently." 3 sentences, simple, short, but they shook something inside me. From that day, I started speaking one new sentence every morning. Not for YouTube, not for school, not for a test, but for me. I didn't care if the grammar was perfect. I didn't care if the pronunciation was correct. I just wanted my voice to stop being afraid. Here's what my first week looked like. Day 1. I want to speak English. Day 2. I believe in myself. Day 3. My English is getting better. Day 4. I'm not afraid to try. Day 5. I can talk about my day. Day 6. It's okay to make mistakes. Day 7. I will not stay silent anymore. That last one made me cry. Because I knew this wasn't about English anymore. This was about me. Choosing to exist. Choosing to be heard. Most people try to speak English by thinking, but I had already done too much thinking. I needed to do the opposite. I needed to train my mouth. So here's what I did, and it changed everything. 1. Mirror speaking. 5 minutes every morning. I stood in front of the mirror. I looked at myself in the eyes, and I said, "Good morning. Today, I will try to do." Even if I didn't know the words, I tried. Even if I messed up, I smiled. And if I didn't know how to say something, I would speak in broken English. Because broken English is better than perfect silence. Record and replay my voice. I took my phone, opened the recorder, and I said one sentence out loud. Then 2. Then 5. Then I played it back. And I listened. Not to judge myself, but to recognize myself. It was weird at first. Hearing your own voice always feels strange. But over time, it became familiar. And then, beautiful. One shadowing exercise per day. I picked one short English video. Could be a TED Talk or an English conversation. I paused every sentence and repeated after it. I copied the tone, the rhythm, the pauses, like a singer practicing a song. At first I was slow, but slowly. I started flowing. Speak to one object in my room. Yes, I know it sounds funny, but I picked one object in my room, like a chair or a notebook, and I spoke to it. Hello, notebook. Today, I feel tired. Hello, chair. I have a dream. Hello, mirror. I want to change my life. It wasn't about the object. It was about building courage. I had been scared of people, so I started with things, and slowly, the fear disappeared. I was in the kitchen. My younger brother was playing a YouTube video. It was in English. Usually, I would ignore it. But this time, I stopped and listened, and without even thinking, I repeated the line out loud, then another one, and another one. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't perfect. But I felt free. That's when I knew something inside me had changed. Speaking English has nothing to do with being smart. It has nothing to do with your grammar test. It has everything to do with courage. And courage is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And every small sentence I spoke was like lifting a small weight. And over time, I became strong. I still hadn't spoken in front of people. I still hadn't given a full answer in a real conversation. I still hadn't shown the world who I was. But now, I had a voice, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore. The sentence didn't make me fluent. It didn't make me perfect, but it made me believe. And that belief set me free. Part 3. I trained my mouth, not my grammar. After 2 weeks of whispering sentences in the mirror, something strange happened. I started missing my practice. It wasn't a task anymore. It wasn't homework. It became a part of me. Every morning, my feet walked to the mirror before my mind even woke up. It became a habit, a small daily conversation with myself. In English. I still wasn't fluent. I still made mistakes. I still stuttered sometimes. But I could feel something changing. Not outside, but inside. The shift. Most of my life, I studied English like a subject. I memorized words. I circled correct answers. I passed tests. But I never learned to speak. I never trained to express. I never practiced to perform. Because schools train your brain, but no one trains your mouth. I realized something powerful. Speaking is not knowledge. Speaking is muscle memory, just like athletes train their legs, just like singers train their vocal cords. If you want to speak English, you must train your mouth. I knew all the grammar rules. Past perfect, present continuous, modals, tenses, conditional. But none of those helped me when my voice shook in public. Because my problem wasn't grammar, it was fear. Lack of muscle memory, lack of confidence, lack of real daily speaking. So I made a decision. From now on, no more grammar books, no more memorizing for perfection. I would train my mouth every single day until it stopped shaking. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post on social media. I didn't need motivation. I needed results. I created a simple system, one that changed my life forever. I stood in front of the mirror, no phone, no distractions. I made eye contact with myself. I treated the reflection like another person, and I began, "Good morning. How are you today? What are your plans?" It felt awkward, but I smiled. I spoke slowly. I opened my mouth more than usual. I focused on movement. Because speaking is physical, and I needed to teach my mouth how to move again. Next, I picked one English sentence from a movie, podcast, or TED Talk. Example: success doesn't come from what you do occasionally. It comes from what you do consistently. I listened. I wrote it down. Then I recorded myself saying it out loud, 5 times in a row. Play, pause, repeat. Listen to my own voice. Fix the flow, train the rhythm. No one else needed to hear me. I was building muscle, building confidence, building rhythm. Every day I chose one simple topic. What did I do yesterday? My favorite food. A memory from school. My future dreams. Then I spoke about it, in English, for 2 minutes minimum. Even if I stuttered, even if I paused, even if I forgot words. If I didn't know the word for something, I explained it in another way. This taught me how to survive in conversation, not just memorize lines. Before sleeping, I did a final whisper practice. No energy, no pressure. Just me and my thoughts. In English. Even if I was tired, I would say one or two simple sentences like, "Today I practiced well. I'm getting better slowly. Tomorrow I will try again." That bedtime voice became my daily goodbye to fear. I didn't become fluent overnight. But after 30 days, I could speak without panic. I could speak without whispering. I could speak without feeling like a fraud. One day, something unexpected happened. My cousin came to visit. We were sitting in the living room. He asked me, "Have you watched this new English movie?" I nodded. Then, without thinking, I started talking about the story. In English. Not perfectly, but naturally. He looked at me, surprised. He said, "When did you start speaking like this?" And I smiled, because I knew. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a course. It wasn't a miracle. It was mouth training, daily, honest, alone, in silence. And now, I was speaking. Not for them. For me. If you're watching this video right now, let me tell you the truth. You do not need better grammar. You need mouth training. You need real sentences, real practice, real repetition. Your brain already knows English, but your mouth doesn't trust you yet. So teach it, train it, talk, whisper, stumble, pause, but do it every single day. And I promise you, your voice will return. I had spoken in front of the mirror. I had spoken to myself. I had spoken to my phone. But I had never spoken in front of a group. I had never stood up in public and said something in English with eyes watching me. And deep inside, that fear was still there, waiting, whispering, "What if you freeze again? What if they laugh? What if you fail again?" And then one day, the opportunity came. It was a simple presentation in class, just 60 seconds, just one topic. But it was enough to shake my hands, enough to remind me of every moment I stayed silent before. I stood up. I walked to the front. My legs felt heavy, my chest tight. My name was called. And I opened my mouth. It was a Thursday. The air in class felt heavy that morning, like something big was about to happen. Our teacher stood in front of us and said, "Tomorrow, each of you will give a short talk in English." My heart dropped. I tried to act normal, but inside, I was frozen. I felt it immediately. The old fear. It came back fast, like a wave. My chest tightened. My palms began to sweat. That voice in my head started again. "You can't do this. You'll freeze. They'll laugh." That night, a storm inside me. I walked home slowly. The whole world felt louder than usual. My thoughts were screaming. My breathing was shallow. I couldn't eat properly. I sat at the dinner table staring at my plate. My mom asked, "Is everything okay?" I smiled. "Yeah, just tired." But I wasn't tired. I was terrified. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling again. The same ceiling I had stared at weeks ago, when I couldn't even say one sentence. But now, something was different. I wasn't just afraid. I was also ready. At 2:13 a.m., I got out of bed. I stood in front of my mirror. I looked at myself, just like I had on day one. I saw the same eyes, but not the same person. And I whispered, "You've trained for this. You're not silent anymore. They're not enemies. They're just people. You have a voice now. Use it." And then I said my lines, the ones I would say the next day, again and again and again. My mouth still shook, but it didn't close. That was enough for me. The next morning, my hands were cold. My stomach felt empty, even after breakfast. We reached school. Everyone was nervous. People were flipping notebooks, repeating sentences, whispering to themselves. I just sat quietly, not because I was calm, but because I was preparing for war. The teacher called out the first name, then another, and then I heard it. Liam. I stood up. My legs felt like they weighed 100 pounds. I walked slowly to the front of the class. My teacher smiled. The students were watching. Some leaned back. Some were scrolling their phones. But I noticed one thing. Everyone was silent. I had been scared of that silence for years. But this time, I was standing inside it. I looked up and I said, "Good morning. My name is Liam." My voice cracked slightly. But it came out. It came out. I paused. Then I breathed. Then I continued. Today, I want to talk about my journey with English. Someone raised their eyebrows. Someone whispered, "Oh, okay." But I ignored everything, except my next sentence. For many years, I was scared of this language. I thought if I made a mistake, people would laugh. So I stayed silent. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, but I kept going. I said, "But silence is heavier than any mistake. It doesn't protect you, it traps you." And I got tired of hiding. One girl looked up from her desk. A boy in the corner sat forward slightly. I could feel the room shifting. So I started speaking one sentence a day, to the mirror, to myself, to no one. And slowly, my silence turned into sound. I ended with, "I'm not fluent. I'm still learning, but I'm not silent anymore." Then I said, "Thank you." And I looked up. No one laughed. No one whispered. No one smirked. For about 4 seconds, there was just silence. And then, someone clapped. Then another. Then the entire class clapped. Not because it was a perfect speech. Not because it was advanced English. But because they knew. This was real. This was brave. This was human. My hands were still shaking. But inside, I felt something new. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel like the boy who froze on Zoom. I felt free. Speaking English isn't about sounding perfect. It's about showing up, even when your voice shakes, even when your mouth forgets, even when fear is screaming inside. And when you do that, even the world stops to listen. That one speech changed everything, but it didn't complete me. I still didn't speak in public often. I still avoided long conversations. I still panicked sometimes when native speakers spoke too fast. This was not the finish line. This was the gate. And now, I had to walk through it. Because there was one final fear left. Can I speak English in real life? With strangers? In meetings? On calls? Under pressure? In a job interview? That's where I was heading next. Part 4. I don't study English anymore. I live it. After my classroom speech, something shifted. It wasn't the way people looked at me. It wasn't their applause. It wasn't the praise from the teacher. It was something deeper, something I never expected. I had finally heard my own voice. For years, I lived in my head. I had dreams, ideas, questions, opinions, but I never let them out. Because I thought my English had to be perfect first. But that speech taught me something powerful. You don't need perfect English to be heard. You need real courage to be real. But after that day, I faced a new challenge. A bigger one. Could I speak outside the classroom? Could I speak when no one was guiding me? No one was expecting a presentation? No one was waiting for a speech? Could I speak in life? This question haunted me. Because school was safe. School had structure. School had silence and rules. But life was chaos. Fast, unpredictable, real. And real is where English learners break. I didn't want to break. I wanted to grow. So I made a new promise to myself. From now on, I will not study English. I will live it. It happened when I was walking alone near the bus station. A tourist, probably from the UK, looked lost. He was holding his phone, scanning the street. He looked around and asked in English, "Hey, do you know where the Central Market is?" I froze. Not because I didn't understand. I understood every word. But my brain hesitated. This was not a school question. This was not a safe mirror exercise. This was real life. And real life doesn't give you time to think twice. He repeated, "The market?" And in that moment, for the first time, I decided to act, not overthink. I said, "Yes, just go straight, then second left." My words were slow, broken, simple, but they came out. He smiled. "Perfect. Thanks a lot, man," and walked away. He didn't correct my grammar. He didn't laugh. He didn't wait for me to sound like a native speaker. He just listened, responded, moved on. I stood there, frozen. But this time, not from fear, from pride. I had just spoken English in real life, to a stranger, and the world didn't explode. I didn't die. Nothing bad happened. In fact, something good happened. For the first time ever, I felt useful. In English. That was the beginning of everything. After that, I didn't stop. I wanted more of these moments, more of these small, real-world victories. So I created something called the Real English Challenge. I told myself, every day, I will find one real-world moment to use English, no matter how small, not with friends, not with classmates, but with real people. At first, it was terrifying, but I knew if I didn't use it, I would lose it. So I started small. Day 1, coffee shop. I went to a small cafe in the city where staff spoke a little English. I waited in line. My heart was beating. When my turn came, I looked the barista in the eye and said, "Can I get one cold coffee? And one sandwich, please." It wasn't fancy. It wasn't fast. But I said it. He replied, "Sure. Anything else?" I shook my head, smiled, and said, "No, that's all." It was done. I took my food, sat down, and looked at the receipt. Not because I wanted to check the price, but because I wanted to remember this moment. I had just made my first order, in English, all by myself. Day 2. Voice note to a friend. I had a friend online from Spain. We both were learning English. Usually we texted. But I challenged myself. Today, I would send a voice note in English. It took me 5 tries to record one sentence. My hand was shaking when I pressed send, but I did it. She replied with a voice note too. And that was the beginning of our real English conversations. Not fake ones, not textbook ones. Real friendship, real mistakes, real growth. Day 5. Talking to myself in public. Yes, it sounds weird, but I started walking in the street and pretending I was on a phone call. In English. I'd say things like, "Yeah, I'll be there in 20 minutes. I just had a coffee. Weather is nice today." "Oh, really? That's great. Tell me more." No one paid attention, but I knew what I was doing. I was breaking the fear of speaking in public. And slowly, my voice became natural, comfortable, normal. Day 12. Tourist translation. A group of travelers were struggling to understand the bus schedule. I saw them asking someone, but no one helped. I walked up and I said, "Do you need help?" One of them said, "Yes, we're trying to get to the museum." I explained the bus number, the stop, and how long it would take. They smiled, thanked me, and said, Your English is really good. I almost cried because no one had ever said that to me before. But more than that, I didn't care if it was good. It worked. It connected. It helped. And that's what I really wanted. I was no longer studying English like a subject. I was using it to help people, communicate, make friends, express opinions, ask questions, order food, laugh, live. That's when I realized fluency isn't about big words. It's about comfort in your voice. And that comfort only comes through action, not theory. One day I was brushing my teeth, and I noticed something strange. My thoughts were in English. Simple ones, like, I should buy toothpaste. I hope the store is still open. Don't forget your phone. But they weren't in my native language anymore. I was living inside English, not just learning from outside. That moment changed everything. Because now I wasn't speaking English to impress someone. I wasn't speaking to pass a test. I was speaking because this was who I had become. Everything was getting better. My confidence was growing. I was no longer scared of English conversations. But then, one email changed everything. It was an opportunity to apply for a remote internship with a global design company. They needed someone who could present designs, work with an international team, and communicate in English daily. I had the skills. But the interview? It was going to be on video, in English. And suddenly, the fear returned. But I wasn't that boy anymore. The one who froze, the one who ran, the one who hid. Now I had a voice, and it was time to use it for something that could change my life. The job interview was just days away, and I was about to face my biggest test yet. Not a grammar test, not a pronunciation challenge, but a test of everything I had built. From silence, from fear, from effort, from belief. When I got that email, I didn't smile. I didn't jump. I didn't scream or celebrate. I just stared at the screen. Because I knew what this meant. It meant my time had come. No more mirror practice. No more pretending I was ready. No more small conversations. This was real. This was big. This was everything I had dreamed of. A real interview, in English, for a remote internship at a global design company. And the video call was scheduled for Friday. I had 4 days, just 4 days, to prepare for something that might change my entire life. And yes, I was scared, but I wasn't the same Liam I used to be. I was scared, but ready. Day 1, strategy begins. That night, I sat with a notebook and wrote a single sentence at the top of the page. What will they ask me, and how will I answer? Then I imagined every possible question they could ask in the interview. I didn't Google a list. I didn't copy answers from the internet. I used my own mind, my own understanding. Here's what I came up with. Tell us about yourself. Why did you apply for this internship? What kind of design work do you enjoy? Have you ever worked in a team before? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Are you comfortable working in English? I wrote each one down on a separate page. Then I wrote my answers. Slowly. In simple English. No fancy words. No overthinking. Just honesty. But writing wasn't enough. I had to speak. So I stood in front of the mirror, opened my phone's voice recorder, and started practicing. One answer at a time. Again and again and again. And after each recording, I listened. I didn't hate my voice anymore. I just observed it. I fixed my speed. I repeated words I didn't pronounce well. And every time I made a mistake, I just started again. This time, I was not practicing to impress. I was practicing to stay calm, focused, and honest under pressure. Day 2. Building fluency under pressure. I knew the biggest challenge wasn't the words. It was the pressure. The moment when fear grabs your throat and even the words you know disappear. So I created a new practice technique. Answer under countdown. I set a 5-second timer. I looked at a question, and when the timer ended, I had to start answering. No time to think, no time to prepare. Just speak. Whatever comes out. It was difficult. At first I paused too much. I said, too many times. I forgot what I was saying mid-sentence, but I kept going. Because this was the reality of interviews. They don't wait. They don't slow down for you. You have to show up with your truth, even if it's not perfect. Day 3. Real practice with a stranger. On day 3, I did something I had never done before. I booked a free mock interview with the trainer online. It was a 20-minute Zoom session where they pretend to be an interviewer and ask you real questions. In English. It cost nothing, but it would cost me everything emotionally. Because I knew this would be raw, this would be real, this would be uncomfortable. And it was. The woman on the screen smiled and said, "Hello, Liam. We'll begin now." My voice shook. She asked, "Tell me about yourself." And suddenly, my mind went blank. I had practiced this question 100 times. But still, I froze. I took a breath and said, "My name is Liam. I am a designer. I learning English and I want to grow. I work hard." I messed up grammar. My words were slow. My confidence dropped. But she didn't stop me. She said, "Great, keep going." And I did. By the end of the mock interview, I had answered all questions. Not perfectly, but I had finished. And the trainer smiled again and said, "You have potential, Liam. You're honest. That matters more than big words." I closed the laptop and exhaled. I had failed the fake interview, but I had passed something more important. The fear of trying. Day 4. Silence before the storm. The night before the interview, I didn't touch my phone. I didn't open Instagram. I didn't watch any videos. I just sat alone and reflected. I reminded myself why I started, where I came from, what I had overcome, and who I had become. I wasn't that boy who stayed silent anymore. I was a speaker, a dreamer, a doer, and tomorrow, I would show that, even if I failed. Because failure in English doesn't hurt like silence. Silence kills your dreams slowly. Mistakes? They make you stronger. So I slept early. No fear, no panic, just purpose. The interview day, Friday morning, 9:47 a.m. The interview was at 10 a.m. I had shaved, combed my hair, set up my laptop, cleaned my background, wore a simple blue shirt. My heart was calm, but fast. I checked everything twice. Camera, microphone, internet, 9:59 a.m. I sat in front of the screen staring at the Zoom link. 10 o'clock, I clicked Join Meeting. The screen blinked, and suddenly, there they were, 2 people, 1 woman, 1 man, both smiling. The woman spoke first. "Hi, Liam. Thank you for joining. Can you hear us okay?" And right there, in that one moment, I faced the ghost of my past. Because years ago, I had heard the same line. And I froze. But now, I smiled back and said, "Yes, I can hear you clearly. Thank you so much for the opportunity." And from that moment on, I didn't stop speaking. They asked me about my work. I told them how I design, why I design, how I use feedback, what I'm learning now. They asked me about teamwork. I shared my small group projects in school, how I listen, how I handle conflict. They asked about my goals. I said, to grow as a designer and as a communicator. They asked, are you comfortable working in English daily? I smiled. I said, I won't say I'm perfect, but I speak every day. I learn every day, and I am not afraid anymore. They nodded, and one of them, the man, said something I'll never forget. Liam, your English is not perfect, but your honesty, your energy, and your growth mindset, that's rare. Thank you. They ended the interview with warm smiles. I closed the laptop, and for the first time in my life, I cried. Not because I failed, but because I had faced everything that used to break me. And I had spoken through it. People don't want your perfect English. They want your real presence. They want your voice, your clarity, your effort, your truth. The world doesn't belong to the fluent. It belongs to the brave. And that day, I had finally become both. I didn't open the email right away. After the interview, I waited, not for a reply, but for silence to return, because I was used to rejection. I had lived with it before, and if they said no, I would still be proud, because this time I had shown up, spoken up, and stayed present, fully, in English. But then, 3 days later, I opened my inbox. The subject line said, "Congratulations, Liam. You're selected." I didn't jump. I didn't scream. I didn't shout or dance. I just sat there, quietly, and let the tears fill my eyes. Not because I was shocked, but because I was ready. Not just for the job, but for the life that was now opening up to me. It was a Monday morning. My first meeting was scheduled at 10 a.m. with 5 other team members across the world. People from Germany, Brazil, Canada, and South Korea. All of them spoke fluent English. And now? So would I. I logged in. My camera was on. My mic was working. They smiled. And someone said, "Hey, Liam, welcome to the team." And I replied, "Thank you. I'm really happy to be here." That sentence, it was short. But for me, it was louder than a speech because I wasn't speaking English to learn. I was speaking English to live. In the next few weeks, I learned something powerful. English was no longer a task. It had become my tool, not something I studied, something I used every single day. I was speaking in team meetings, daily emails, feedback calls, brainstorming sessions, design presentations, chat groups. And the most beautiful part? I was not perfect, and no one expected me to be. In fact, my boss once told me, "Liam, your English is clear and human." That's more important than being advanced. And that sentence gave me more strength than any textbook ever could. There were moments, little ones, that told me I had finally crossed over. Like when I was leading a project presentation, and someone interrupted me to ask a question. In the past, that would have scared me. But now? I smiled, nodded, and said, "Sure, let me explain that part again." I didn't panic. I didn't freeze. I just spoke. There was another moment. One of my teammates messaged me privately and said, "Your feedback in the meeting really helped." You explained it very clearly. I reread that message 3 times. Because I remembered a time when I couldn't even say, "I need help." Now I was helping others. In English. That's when I realized I hadn't just learned to speak. I had become someone new. Before, I used to think in my native language, translate it in my head, then speak in English. But slowly, without even noticing, that stopped. I was now thinking in English, feeling in English, responding in English, writing in English, dreaming in English. Not perfectly, but naturally. And I didn't force it. I just lived it. Because when you use a language daily, not for school, but for life, your brain adapts. It starts to feel like home. And for the first time, English felt like home. I wasn't learning anymore. I was living. I started watching documentaries in English, not for practice, but for joy. I read blog posts and books without checking the dictionary every second. I commented on international forums. I joined global communities. I was speaking with designers in other countries, making friends, having inside jokes, sharing feedback, giving opinions, all in English. And not once did I say, "Sorry for my English," because I had nothing to be sorry for. This was my voice now. This was my language too. I had earned it, and I was using it, proudly. Something deeper, something more powerful than fluency, a sense of identity. I was no longer the boy who stayed quiet in class, or the one who avoided eye contact in English shops, or the one who smiled and nodded without saying a word. Now, I was confident, I was trusted, I was respected. Because of my voice, because of my journey, because of my story, and even though I still made mistakes, they didn't define me. My courage did. If you're watching this video and you feel scared to speak, if you've been stuck in silence for months, years, if you think you'll never become fluent, I want to tell you the truth. You don't need magic. You don't need perfection. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to start. Speak one sentence today. Whisper it if you have to. Say it to yourself. Say it in front of a mirror. Record it. Repeat it. But say it. Because every time you speak, you are telling the world, I am not invisible. I have a voice. I am becoming. I had come a long way. From a small town with no English teachers, no role models, no one to correct me, to a global design internship, meetings, projects, recognition. And for the first time in my life, I was not just speaking English, I was living in it. But one part of my journey was still unfinished. Something that had been with me since the very beginning. My father. The man who once said to me, "People like us don't need English." The man who believed that broken English meant broken pride. The man who watched me fail, fall, and disappear into my room every time I couldn't say a sentence. He didn't stop me, but he never encouraged me either. I hadn't been home for almost a year. I had been working remotely, earning in dollars, speaking daily with global teams. And now, finally, I returned. Same village, same streets, same house. But I was different. I wasn't nervous about the language anymore. But I was nervous about one thing. Would my father be proud of the person I became? Would he understand what I had fought for? Or would he still think, he just learned a language? What's the big deal? He was sitting outside, on the old wooden bench, same place he always sat. I walked up to him. He looked at me. "You look different." I smiled. "I feel different, Dad." There was silence. Not uncomfortable. Just unfamiliar. He looked away. Then, with his eyes still on the ground, he said, "I saw your interview clip. The one your company posted." My heart skipped a beat. "You saw that?" He nodded slowly. "You were speaking, all in English, confident, calm, like one of them." I waited. I didn't know what would come next. And then he said, "I was wrong." I looked at him, not sure what he meant. I thought English was just a foreign language, a show-off skill, a waste of time. He paused. "But I saw something else. I saw the world listening to you. I saw respect in their eyes. I saw pride." He finally turned and looked at me. And I felt proud too. I felt my chest tighten. This was the moment I had dreamed of. Not applause, not certificates, not promotions, just this. My father sitting on a wooden bench saying, "I'm proud of you." That night I sat alone in my room. I opened my old notebook, the one where I wrote my first English sentence. My name is Liam. I want to speak English. I touched those words like they were ancient magic, because they were. That one sentence had changed my life. That one dream had led me here. My life today. Today, I work full-time for a global design firm based in Amsterdam. I manage international teams. I lead client meetings. I give presentations. I write reports. I speak on podcasts, all in English. My salary is $5,200 per month. I send money home. I help my sister pay for college. I built a new room for my parents. But more than money, I brought something home that we never had before. Hope. I used to think the victory was fluency, but now I know. The real victory is courage, consistency, confidence. Not fancy words, not perfect grammar, but the willingness to speak when your voice shakes. That's what changes lives. That's what changed mine. If you're still watching this video, I want you to know something very simple. It is possible. Even if you come from a small village, you have no English environment, you feel embarrassed, you make 100 mistakes, it is still possible. Because I started from zero, and I made it here. Not because I was special, but because I never gave up. Train your mouth, train your mind, train your courage. Speak even when no one is listening. Practice even when no one believes in you. Because one day, the world will listen, and your voice will matter. And on that day, you will realize you didn't just learn English, you changed your entire life.
Like, share, and subscribe to our channel.